They were outgunned, outnumbered, and almost forgotten by history. But on the morning of October 25, 1944, one tiny American ship, led by a man who refused to back down, charged headfirst into a fleet of Japanese battleships and changed the course of naval warfare forever. This is the story of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, the ship that fought like a battleship, even when it knew it wouldn't come home. If you believe in courage that defies all odds, stay with us. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and honor their legacy. It was just after dawn on October 25, 1944. The sea was still, the air humid, and the sky painted in the pale orange of a waking day. Aboard the USS Samuel B. Roberts, Lieutenant Commander Robert W. Copeland sat quietly at the bridge, sipping a tin mug of hot black coffee. It was his ritual, one calm moment before the duties of war resumed. Outside the portholes, the escort carrier group known as Taffy 3 steamed along Leyte Gulf. Seemingly far from any immediate threat, Copeland's ship was a destroyer escort, lightly armed. Lightly armored but fast and courageous. At just over 300 feet long, it was built to guard the larger carriers and freighters from submarines. But this morning the comm was deceptive. The radio man was at his station checking frequencies. The crew was beginning breakfast rotations. Some young sailors were joking on deck, unaware that history was about to etch their names into one of the most heroic last stands in naval warfare. Copeland leaned forward, scanning the open sea with his binoculars. He didn't yet know that just over the horizon, a Japanese fleet of battleships and cruisers, far larger and deadlier, was steaming directly toward them. The calm wouldn't last. At 6:45 a.m., the calm was shattered. From the bridge, Copeland heard the sudden, sharp crackle of the intercom. Then came the chilling words, "Enemy fleet sighted. Large formation. Bearing 010, battleships, cruisers, closing fast." He froze for half a second, heart sinking. A battleship force? Here it was impossible. They had been told the Japanese Navy was retreating, its carriers crippled. Yet here they were, a whole task force of Imperial ships, led by the massive battleship Yamato, emerging like ghosts from the morning mist. He rushed to the periscope and raised it. What he saw made his blood run cold. The gleam of rising sun off heavy turrets, the black shadows of gun towers, an overwhelming force bearing down on them at full speed. The Japanese center force had slipped through the San Bernardino Strait overnight. Now it was heading directly for the small American escort group, with guns that could crush them from miles away. Copeland knew the odds. The Samuel B. Roberts couldn't outrun them, couldn't outgun them. But he also knew this. The carriers behind him, flat-topped, slow-moving and vulnerable, stood no chance without cover. This wasn't just a battle, it was a choice: flee and live, or turn and fight for those who couldn't defend themselves. He grabbed the mic and gave the order that would define him forever. "All hands to battle stations. We are going in." The klaxon screamed. Boots pounded across the decks. Men rushed to their guns, their hearts thudding like war drums. Below, in the engine room, sailors opened the throttles wide. The Samuel B. Roberts surged forward, not away from danger, but straight into it. She was the first to charge. The sea erupted in fire. Japanese battleships opened up with their 14-inch and 18-inch guns, each shell the size of a small car, screaming through the air and plunging into the ocean like meteors. Towering geysers exploded around the Samuel B. Roberts, throwing up walls of water that rocked the small destroyer like a toy in a storm. But Copeland didn't flinch. He stood firm on the bridge, eyes locked on the nearest target, a Japanese heavy cruiser, many times the size of his ship. He knew that with the right speed, angle, and sheer nerve, they might just get close enough to do real damage. Helm full ahead, hard to port, close the range. He was taking the fight to them. The Samuel B. Roberts weaved between incoming fire, her gunners returning every shot they could muster. The ship shuddered under the pressure of its own 5-inch guns, belching fire as the young crew fought like lions. One gunner, barely 19, yelled through smoke and chaos as he reloaded again and again, teeth gritted with fury. They weren't supposed to last 5 minutes, but minute by minute they defied the impossible. At 9,000 yards, dangerously close, Copeland ordered the launch of torpedoes. The sleek metal fish slipped into the sea and raced toward the enemy cruiser. Moments later, a blinding flash. One torpedo struck home. The enemy ship shuddered, smoke billowing from its side. Cheers erupted on the deck of the Roberts, even as shells screamed overhead. But there was no time to celebrate. A direct hit smashed into the aft section of the Samuel B. Roberts, sending shrapnel and flame through the deck. Men screamed. Blood mixed with oil. But the crew didn't abandon their posts. They fought harder. They fought on. And above it all, Copeland stood like iron, his white uniform stained, his face streaked with sweat and smoke, refusing to fall. This was no longer just defense. It was defiance. The flames licked at the sky. By 8:15 a.m., the Samuel B. Roberts was a battered wreck still charging forward, guns blazing. Smoke poured from her midsection. Her engine compartment had taken a direct hit. And yet she would not die. Copeland limped from the bridge to the starboard rail, rallying what was left of his men. Even the wounded refused to retreat. One sailor, his arm shredded by shrapnel, braced a gun with his knees and kept firing with one good hand. They had fired over 600 rounds from their 5-inch guns, more than they were ever meant to carry. The barrels glowed red. Some had jammed, but the crew used any means necessary to keep them alive, sometimes feeding the shells by hand, sometimes praying with each shot. Behind them, the American escort carriers began to retreat, but only because ships like the Roberts stood in the way. The enemy hesitated. The Japanese admiral, confused and convinced he was facing a much larger fleet, began to second-guess. He could not believe these tiny ships would dare such a suicide charge unless they were bait, and in a way they were. Copeland knew the Roberts would not make it out, but he also knew that if he gave even 5 more minutes to the carriers, it meant lives saved. His final radio transmission was steady but grim. "We're engaging the enemy as best we can. Tell them we gave them everything we had." Then a final thunderous shell tore through her hull. The Samuel B. Roberts groaned, rolled, and began to sink. Subscribe for more good old days. Copeland gave the order to abandon ship, but only after ensuring every wounded man had a life jacket. He was among the last to leap into the burning sea, salt stinging his wounds, his eyes never leaving the black silhouette of his ship as she slipped beneath the waves. The Samuel B. Roberts had lasted nearly 2 hours against overwhelming odds. They had fought battleships with a destroyer escort and held the line.